Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome back to this online workshop series. Today is the third and final part of this week's Log360 training. My name is Siddharth Sharat Kumar, for those of you who are joining in only for today, and I'll be your host and presenter for this session. As always, before we get started, do use the live chat option or the hand raise option on the GoToWebinar panel to let me know that you can hear me loud and clear, and do drop in a message in case you have any issues with hearing me or with the chat screen. So I'd just like to wait for a few seconds. Please do take a moment to let me know that everything is okay with my audio, and I hope you can also see my chat screen. Okay, so I've got a few hand raises. Thank you so much for that. So in today's workshop, the final part, we're going to be looking at a few advanced capabilities of Log360, starting with the idea of event correlation. We'll go over some of the predefined rules that are available in the solution, as well as touch upon some of the custom rules that you can create and how would you go about doing that. We'll also introduce you to some of the more advanced features. These are the add-ons of threat intelligence and UEBA. So we'll go over exactly what these things are, in what cases how can it add value to your security monitoring capabilities, and some of the use cases and feature sets for these add-ons as well, right? So as always, we'll take questions at the end of the session, so you can definitely keep your questions coming on the live chat, and I will try to answer them at the end of the webinar. And again, as always, we'll send you the recording in a week or so, so you don't have to worry about getting access to the presentation and the video at a later point. Okay, so this is what we've been trying to do, right, in this workshop series over the last couple of days. We've been looking at how can we transform security event information into actionable insights. So we have a lot of log data, a lot of event sources that are generating these logs. We've collected them into a central repository, and we've applied various techniques to gain actionable insights. Starting with, we looked at querying the database. So we looked at how can we run search queries, how can we define various criteria to pull out information that we may need in a given context, right? So this is of course important when you're investigating an incident, but we also looked at how can we identify something by looking at reports, right? So we looked at how can we visualize data. We looked at running reports for various things. It could be changes made to GPOs. It could be critical events on your Windows server. It could be columns modified on your database. So these kinds of reports helped us visualize things and review these different events of interest on a periodic basis. We recommended doing this every day. And that was to give you deeper insights into your event information. Then we looked at how do we spot specific incidents, right? A specific event that we know we don't want to happen in our networks. Something like a user being moved to domain admins, or a file getting encrypted, or a SQL injection attack on your web server. So these individual events can be detected by configuring alert profiles, and we had a look at that. Now, the next stage is to discover more complex attack patterns, right? The next stage is to discover attacks where an individual event might not indicate, that you're under attack, but rather a chain of events or a suspicious pattern of events might indicate that you are under attack. So that is what we're going to be focusing on to begin with, right? You can see how these are different stages of gaining insights, and each of them are important in their own right. It's not that one is important and the others, one is more important than the other, but each of it has a role to play in actually transforming your security event information into actionable insights. Because even once you get an alert or once you use a correlation rule to discover an attack, you still need to come back to your search engine and try to, gather more relevant information about that security incident. So keep that in mind. It's not that these different stages from 1 through 4 are increasing order of importance. It's all equally important, and each of them have a different role in what they do. So be clear about that. So today we'll start off by looking at why do we need event correlation. I've already hinted at why we need it in terms of some attacks might not be a concern when you just see one single event, right? Like if you see just a failed logon event, that by itself does not mean you need an alert, because in fact, if you start getting alerts for every failed logon, you're just going to be bombarded with alerts and drown in the alerting noise. So we obviously want to make sure we get limited alerts, but all the alerts are contextual and all the alerts are actually a cause for concern. And correlation is a great way to minimize the number of false positives. So let's get started with that. Okay, so what is a correlation rule? So a correlation rule is a chain of events that could indicate suspicious activity, right? So it associates events from different event sources to identify a security threat at an early stage. So you might have an event happening on a VPN, you might have an event happening on one of your servers, and you might have an event happening on one of your databases. All of this put together will help you identify when you are under an attack even before the final data breach takes place, right? So what you can do in this case is you can look at algorithms that are constantly monitoring various known attack patterns, and these algorithms can help you identify an attack at an early stage. So you can see why this is important, right? If you take your VPN logs give you specific information about what's going on at the VPN level. It obviously does not know what's happening at the server. And at the same time, if you take your server's logs, it does not know what related event happened at the VPN. And if you look at your database will not know what has happened on the server, right? Just give me a moment there. I think we're having a small issue with the shared screen. I guess a couple of people are saying that you cannot see the shared screen. Just give me a moment. Let me just look into that. Okay, I think we should be back up now. You should be able to see my share screen. So Suhas and George, can you just confirm that you can see my share screen now? I have re-enabled the screen share. Can you just confirm that you can see the screen right now? You should be able to see a slide that says what is a correlation rule, right? Can you just please confirm that? Can everybody see the shared screen? You should be able to see. Yeah, okay. I think most of you are saying that you can see it. Thank you. Thank you for that. If anyone is facing an individual difficulty I have most people saying they can see the shared screen. So in case you are unable to do that, just try to join again, right? So yeah, George, I think George has also said that has recommended rejoining the webinar. So in case anyone isn't able to see the share screen, just rejoin and you should be able to see it. Okay, so just coming back to this slide, the point I'm trying to make is that an individual event source does not know what's happening on other event sources in your network, right? So that is the whole reason why we need a correlation engine, to be able to construct the entire story of what's going on in the network, right? Because your individual, if you take your Windows security log, it's giving you important details about who's accessing which file and folder, who's logging on to which system, what are the changes happening in Active Directory, but it does not know what is that user doing after they, log onto a system or access a file or make a change in Active Directory. They may move to other parts of your network, and all of these different events that they perform may all be part of that same single incident, right? And if you end up getting up multiple alerts across different devices, you will be drowned in the alerting noise and you will not know where to begin investigating. So correlation rules are going to solve that problem. You can leverage various pre-built correlation rules. Pre-built correlation rules are ones that are available out of the box from within a SIM solution. These would be to identify common use cases which have been studied extensively by cybersecurity researchers. And these kinds of correlation rules will immediately help you detect a wide bunch of attacks. Now, additionally, depending on your enterprise's requirements, you may want to configure custom correlation rules to solve specific kinds of use cases, right? These could be because you have specific, components in your infrastructure and you have very specific monitoring requirements that you need to meet as per your internal policies. So let's have a look at how these would work. I'm going to jump into Event Log Analyzer and show you how correlation rules would look like. So you can find this in the correlation tab of the solution. And in the correlation tab, on the left pane, you will see the various correlation rules that we have. These are the built-in rules or the built-in algorithms that are tracking specific kinds of use cases. And we have categorized these into various, various kinds of attacks. So you have, for example, attacks to do with a Windows firewall, right? Or it could be something like a potential network threat. It could be, for example, a potential Windows threat, and you have various algorithms that are tracking things like worm activity, application crashes, and so on, right? So this means that you can enable some of these rules. These are all, of course, pre-built, which means that these have backend hard-coded algorithms that are watching out for specific kinds of things like worm activity or suspicious backup activities and so on. So let's look at an example of how one of these would look like. I touched upon this in yesterday's session, but let's look at that example again. A suspicious software was installed on one of my servers, and the product was able to give me an alert. Now let's look at the event timeline, which is the chain of events that have been grouped into a single incident. So all of these events put together, instead of raising them as individual alarms where you end up with 10 or 15 alarms in just a minute, you instead get one alarm which associates all of these related events and tells you exactly what has happened with the chain of events and all of the details at your fingertips. So in this case, we saw that there was some suspicious VPN activity. We saw a brute force kind of pattern for a user to log into the VPN. Then what happens is, okay, the IP address is assigned to the VPN user. Then a Windows account successfully logs on using remote logon, and a software is installed on the Windows. Now, all of these events are happening within a short period of time, triggered on the same machine by the same user. So the fact that it's all happened this way means that the product can use its algorithms to alert you on a potential suspicious software installation on this server. And you get all of these details, right? So you get this event history, which essentially tells you all of the different events that happened. And you can check, for each of these events, you can click on details and dive deeper into that exact event, all of the fields in the log message for that event, right? So all of that is presented here, the time, the device type, the port, all of these things, the username and so on. So this is, you can always come to the correlation tab and open these up, but you also will get these as alerts, right? So these are, it's not that it's just going to get populated in your correlation tab, but you can see that there are alerts that have been triggered. And here you can see that it says it's based on a correlation rule, right? So these will be triggered as regular alerts. So you will be notified that something has happened. Coming back to the correlation tab itself, you can actually go to manage rules. And here is where you can, choose what are the rules. These are all the predefined, some of the predefined rules. You can actually go and choose which ones you want to activate and deactivate, right? So you can see that some of these rules are inactive, some are active. So obviously, if some rules are not relevant in your infrastructure, you can go ahead and enable or disable them as per your requirements. And you can see it's all been categorized, right? So you have categories like software management, cryptocurrency, which is like crypto mining detections, audit policy related changes, authorization events, user management events, Windows threats, and so on. So you can have a look at all of these rules and choose which to enable or disable. Next is you have also something called activity rules. This is particularly useful if you are customers of ManageEngine's Password Manager Pro. So this brings in some of the data from Password Manager Pro, and you're looking at specific session activities on different machines, and you're able to correlate some of those events with other events happening in your network to detect more attacks that might have been missed otherwise. Not going to touch upon too much of this, but let's look at the basic correlation rules again and how you can actually create your own rule, right? Because all of these rules are pre-built, which means these are all available out of the box, but you can create your own custom rules by making use of various actions that we provide. I'm sorry about that. Let me just reload this one. Just for a moment, I lost the connectivity. Yeah, sorry about that. We just lost the connectivity for a moment. Just going to reload this page. Should be back up now. So yeah, I hope you can see on the left pane, we have various correlation actions that are built in, which means you can use these. You can use these for building your own custom correlation rule, right? So I hope the sound is back now. Just confirm that on the live chat. But yeah, you can use each of these actions to build a custom correlation rule, right? So you can see, for example, you have various logon events or workstation events, network device events, and so on. And you can choose from these different events to build your own pattern of events, right? This would be your own rule. So where this is particularly useful is when you're using, very specific vendors. So you may, for example, be using a Qualys vulnerability scanner, and you want to make use of that data in your correlations. So you can use, for example, open UDP detected. You can click on such an action. You will get to then tweak this action. You can choose, some of these log fields, use some of these logical operators like equals, contains, and so on. You can then set a threshold for the action. And then you can also go on to create, and then you can add more actions, right? So you can go on and choose something like you have like a vulnerability alert, and then you might want to bring in a specific IDS IPS event, for example, like a possible attack. So that would be action 2. And you can, go on building this by setting up these parameters, right? So you get to choose many things. I'm not going to go into too many individual cases, but some of the important things that you have to keep in mind are, yes, you pick an action that tells you what that specific event is. You choose some of these attributes like the device name. You give a logical operator and build the condition. You can choose a threshold limit after that if you wish. Then you can choose a time within which the next action occurs. This can be done in minutes or seconds as you, depending on the situation. So then you choose a second action and do the same thing, right? You do the same thing. You go choose, this is a single event, so you don't get to tweak that. So you can say, you can choose a threshold. You can then put a, again, followed by within how many minutes, and then go on to add a next event. So this could be maybe something on your SQL, something like a database that is backed up, for example, and you can go on building your rule like that. And then you can create the rule, and now the product will start monitoring for that pattern of events, right? So these are like alerting rules, except that here we are choosing multiple different criteria as opposed to a single criteria. And because we are choosing multiple different events, we need to make sure that we are specifying exactly what happens between these events, how long to wait for the next event, are there any thresholds, and so on. Right? So this is a robust way of creating a correlation rule because you get device specific actions that you can choose from. So we are not just saying generic database or web server events, but we're looking specifically at a specific database or a specific web server that you may be using. So correlation is really a mix of two things. On the one hand, you have pre-built correlation rules, which are available in the product, which gives you, cover for various security use cases that you may be dealing with, various security use cases that are commonly, are of a common concern for most administrators. And then you use custom correlation rules to create your own specific rules for your requirements. So I've seen a few questions coming in on the correlation. I'll answer most of them at the end, but one of them is quite interesting. And this is from Urmas Kahar. Thank you for asking your question. The question is, can I use different time zones in the correlation rules? Okay, so Urma says they have offices all around the world. So can I use different time zones? That's a fantastic question. There are two things that you have to consider here. One is if you have various offices all around the world, you can then employ the distributed architecture of Event Log Analyzer. That is a case where you deploy several installations of Event Log Analyzer in each of your locations and then use a central admin server to manage all of these installations. So on each of the individual installations, you can go ahead and define these things like your time zones and your business hours, working hours, non-working hours, and your central your central admin server will then be able to help you access individual instances of Event Log Analyzer. So that will help you with your use case. Over and above this, you also have something called UEBA, which we are going to get into in just a bit. UEBA is going to flip the equation and say, you don't have to really configure time zones per se, but UEBA is going to look at what is the normal expected behavior in terms of the time for a specific user or system, and it goes to that specific system's behavior. And if it does something out of the ordinary, maybe one user works from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Another user works from 12 p.m. to 9 p.m. So it goes to the individual user and checks for anomalies. Right? So these are a couple of things that you want to keep in mind. If you have any specific question for your use case, do reach out again on the live chat and we'll answer them at the end. Or you can, of course, drop an email to me or the support team. But that was a great question because in the case here, in the case of what Urmas asked, they're concerned about how do we now make sure that in different locations we are able to track these events. And that is where the concept of distributed architecture comes in. Right? So keep that in mind for those of you who have global locations or multiple locations and sites that you are monitoring. Keep this in mind. Okay, so I hope correlation is clear. We are, in terms of the concept at least, the correlation is about making sure that you have rules to take care of various kinds of security use cases. Maybe I'll take one more question. I just got one more right now from Carolina. Thank you for asking your question. Carolina's question is, does correlation rules include all the devices defined in ELA? Okay, that's another very good question. So the question that Carolina is asking essentially is, do we have correlation rules for every single device that we are monitoring? For which the answer is not every device, but for most of the common devices, we give pre-built correlation rules. But for some of your other devices, that is where you bring in custom correlation rules. Right? So if you go to the pre-built correlation rules section, let me just go back to that. Here you can see, for example, you have specific kinds of things like web server threads, database threads, some of your file integrity threads, Windows Unix threads, and so on. Each of them are looking at specific kinds of things, right? So this will cover some of the common devices that you may have, like a firewall or a database or a web server. But when you're looking at some specific things is where you go to the custom correlation rules. So it's really a mix of both. You want to use the pre-built rules for some of the common devices and use cases, and you use the custom correlation rules. And here we have tried to be exhaustive. I cannot say we have it for literally every device, but for a lot of the things we have given device-specific rules, right? So it could be something as specific as an AS400 machine, it could be an Oracle database, it could be a specific vendor of a firewall, it could be a vulnerability scanner, a threat solution, virtual machines, all of these things. And even if you notice, if you're familiar with some of other managed engine tools, even some of our other applications that are tracking specific events. For example, here, Op Manager is not something that everyone might be using. But if you are a customer of Managed Engine's Op Manager, which is a network performance monitoring tool, you can bring in events from Op Manager. Op Manager will help you detect things like a spike in CPU usage, or if a network goes down. So you can correlate that event with something happening on your host to detect an attack. So this is particularly important in the context of crypto mining. In crypto mining, when someone is trying to make use of your network bandwidth in order to, use those resources to mine cryptocurrency, you need to be able to detect the fact that there is a high CPU utilization, something that Op Manager helps you detect. And you might want to associate that with a crypto mining software that is installed on a host, right? So you can see where I'm going with this, that there are multiple cases. There is no way that any SIM vendor can give you built-in correlation rules for every single case. As for what we do, we keep listening to your request, we keep monitoring the market and constantly keep adding new pre-built sources. But for certain specific kinds of devices, you will have to use the custom correlation rule to meet your specific needs. But that was a great question. Thank you for asking that, Carolina. There is some more content coming on this in just a few minutes. So you may get some more details about that. But thank you both for your questions, Carolina and Urmas. And the other questions, don't worry if anything if they have not yet been answered, I'll make sure that they're answered at the end of the session. So let's quickly move on to the next topic of discussion, which is threat intelligence. So threat intelligence is a concept wherein we are using known information about malicious actors on the internet and using that information to identify a malicious communication in our network. So when you're trying to catch a bad guy, it helps to know who these bad guys are, right? So it could be, it's the same concept in day-to-day life. If you, when we always keep, international organizations keep a list of wanted criminals and all of that. The reason we do that is because now this information is available. So if someone ends up spotting this person on the road, and hopefully if they have seen that this person is a wanted criminal, they can report them to the authorities. It's pretty much the same idea with threat intelligence, except that here we are talking about the digital world and we're talking about IPs, domains, and URLs, right? So there are known malicious IPs, domains, and URLs, and we've got great threat researchers who are constantly analyzing the World Wide Web to identify the latest emerging threats. And they maintain all of these in various databases that you can make use of to identify any malicious communication in your network, right? So you might hear the concept threat feeds, right? Because these are dynamic things. These are available as feeds because this keeps updating every day, right? It's not that just like you have a criminal list which can keep changing from day to day as new criminals come out. It's the same with the cyberspace as well. Every day you are identifying new domains that are malicious, and you want to make use of this information. Now, obviously, this does not mean you are covered against any threat, but it does help to know that you can be covered against several threats, right? Because the objective of our SIM solution is to help maximize the chance of detecting an attack. And by leveraging threat intelligence, you can increase the chance of detecting an attack by using all of this information. So within Event Log Analyzer, what we've done in our threat intelligence, and I can talk about this because I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years that I've been working with Log360, how we have changed or improved the threat intelligence module. So in the initial stages, we had something known as the default threat, right? That was all we had as for threat intelligence. And the default threat made use of certain open source threat feeds that we integrated our product with. And we were collecting data from those open source threat feeds and then matching it with communications in your network. So we made use of these open source threat feeds. Customers who had used their added firewalls for monitoring, we were looking at the firewall logs and checking to see if any communication was matching with one of these known malicious actors that we could see from the open source feeds. Now, this became increasingly popular, threat intelligence, and we had a lot of customers saying, oh, you know what, you have integrated your product with certain open source threat feeds, but what if I want to buy my own threat feeds from some provider and I want to add that? So that was also when we had more standardization happening in threat intelligence, because many cybersecurity vendors and researchers realized that threat intelligence has a lot of scope going forward. So standardized formats came into existence that allowed cybersecurity researchers to make their feeds available using these standardized protocols so that it could be accessed by various security teams and integrated with various security products. So those were stick stack C protocols, and we built that into the solution, right? What that means is we are now able to ingest stick stack C feeds. These could be from anything that you may have subscribed to in this format, and you can sync up the product with that feed so that the latest list is dynamically updated. Let me quickly show you where that would be in the product. So if you go to Event Log Analyzer and you go to Settings, you will see two things that have to do with threats. And it's important to know why these two are different. One is a threat source. These could be your threat solutions that you have, like a DLP or something like a FireEye or some of these other solutions that you can see here. And then you have threat management, which is your threat intelligence feeds, right? So make sure you know the distinction between the two. And in the context of threat intelligence, as you probably guessed, we are concerned about threat management. So you go to threat management. Over here, you can see that that is a default server, which is something that we have. This is the thing that is bundled up with the product. So these are open source threat feeds with which we sync up every 24 hours and make sure that you are updated with the latest set of threats that are occurring in these open source threat feeds. And you can then be able to detect malicious communications which appear on these open source feeds. Now, the stick.c feeds can be added by adding a new server right here. So you will have the option to give the URL, which is the your feed. You give the credentials to validate it, and you choose how you want to poll. Do you want to do an hourly, daily, weekly, or a manual poll as well, if you want? So you can do this, and you can make sure that, say, every hour you get information from the feed that you've subscribed to, and that syncs up with the product. And then going forward, you can get alerts. You can get alerts when you detect these communications, and these would come under the threat alerts that you see right here. Right? This would come under the threat alerts that you see right here, and you can get important details about malicious communications that are happening. So you can see which device is it happening on. You can see the message. You can see, important details about that malicious communication. And you can also look at, of course, managing the incident, which we talked about yesterday. But the idea is that we are able to detect a known malicious communication because we are leveraging the information from these threat feeds, be it the open source threat feeds or the one of the custom feeds that you've added, and we are using the data that we're collecting from your network devices to check for malicious communications. So we brought out, after this, just last year, we brought out something called Advanced Threat Analytics, which is available as an add-on. And of course, I touched upon this while promoting our free license for this. We realized that customers were saying, okay, you're helping me detect a known malicious communication, but how do I now get more details and insights into what exactly that malicious communication was? This is, of course, to make sure that you are able to, gain more insights into that incident so that you can take appropriate action. So we partnered with Webroot's Bright Cloud Threat Intelligence Service. Some of you may be familiar with this one. And this partnership allows us to give you deeper insights into the threats that have been flagged. So we are no longer just flagging specific threats, but with advanced threat analytics, we are going to give you more contextual information on that threat. Things like the classification of the IP or URL, is it a phishing domain, and so on. The geo information about the threat, the category of the threat, and something called a reputation score. The reputation score is basically how reputed is that domain according to the researchers. Of course, this is to say that not all malicious threats can be treated equally, right? You might have to prioritize on certain threats, or if you have to block something, you have to be certain that it is malicious. So all of these details that you can see in bold is now available courtesy of our partnership. And this allows us now to give you more details into the threats that have been flagged. So that would look something like this. You will be able to see when you click on a specific alert, you will get to see deeper insights into what's gone on. So you will get to see the name of the malicious domain. You will get to see the category, the age, when was it flagged malicious, when did it last occur on the threat list, how many times did it occur on the threat list. You'll also get some geo information and phishing information about that domain. You get a reputation score, and that is really a game changer because you're now able to see how reputed is this domain. And obviously when it's of low reputation, you get a recommendation as well which says block the URL, right? So you can see how this allows you to detect a threat, then investigate the threat, gain contextual information about exactly what's happened, gain these deep insights into what's happened, and then get recommendations on what action you need to take, right? So detect, investigate, and response. And all of these aspects are now covered with advanced threat analytics. So this is something that we brought out. This is again, and the best part about this is it requires very minimal configuration. There's nothing that you have to do extra apart from, a few minutes of configuring, enabling, not even configuring. You just have to enable this and you can start gaining these deeper insights into the threats on the cyberspace across the World Wide Web that are interacting with your network. So make use of this because this concept is growing increasingly important in cybersecurity, where you need to make sure various security solutions are talking with each other and are deeply integrated. So a firewall needs to be tightly integrated with your SIM, your threat feeds need to be tightly integrated, and you need to have a much more unified view of your security in your network. Okay, so that is advanced threat analytics. And the last part of this workshop is going to talk about UEBA. Now, we already looked at event correlation, and I'm sure you can see the value of event correlation. And these are the two main things that event correlation helps you with. One is it helps you capture specific patterns of events. That's obviously great. So you're able to say, oh, this happened on the VPN, this happened on the database, this happened on a Windows server, and some activity happened on a file. And all of these were triggered by the same user within a few minutes. So you're able to see the entire chain of events as a single incident and get one alarm for that. So that's great. And yes, it of course helps you detect a wide range of indicators of compromise. But you can also see there are some challenges and limitations. In fact, some of the questions that came up on event correlation sort of show you why you cannot just rely on event correlation. Yes, it is very important. Don't get me wrong. You need event correlation, but there are some limitations. One is that rules have limited scope for detecting something anomalous. This is kind of tied to the question that came up about the time, right? Because time-based anomalies are different for every user and every system. It's hard to create an umbrella rule of what is normal and abnormal. Second thing is that for some of these specific cases, yes, you can go and configure some custom rules on your product. You can create these custom correlation rules, but that requires some effort. And beyond a point, how many can you keep configuring and managing? So that is the obvious challenge. And that is where today we are able to use advancements in the field of machine learning and AI to bring in something called user and entity behavior analytics that is able to augment the traditional SIM-based, rule-based analytics. So UEBA, or user and entity behavior analytics, is a technology that works closely with SIM, and they sort of work together. They go hand in hand. Because in the events that I've spoken at, and I've got this question whether it's been in New Zealand or in APAC or in India or in the Middle East, Europe, the US, wherever I've gone, I've at least had one person ask me, is UEBA better than a SIM? Do I need UEBA or do I need a SIM? And for which the answer is, well, you need both these technologies because they work together, right? It's not that one is better. Each of them help you deal with different kinds of things. Your SIM solution is what is collecting all the data, and it's able to apply these rules for generating reports, alerts, and correlations. But UEBA is going to work on top of the data that your SIM has collected, right? UEBA needs data to work on. Machine learning is basically dependent on large volumes of data, and that is what your SIM solution has done a great job at, in bringing all of this data inside into one location. And UEBA is going to use machine learning techniques and statistical analytical techniques, a lot of math involved in analyzing all of this, that data pool that your SIM solution has collected. And what UEBA does is it's able to profile the behaviors of every user and system in your network to form what we call a security baseline, right? Once the security baseline has been formed, the UEBA solution can then spot unusual events. That's what we call anomalies, and it increases what we call a risk score of that user or system, right? So the risk score is basically a number, and I'm going to show you that in just a moment. Each time an anomaly is detected, the UEBA solution will increase the risk score of that user or system. And this is specific anomalies to that user and that system. And this allows you to holistically view threats in your network, right? So this gives you a new view of threats. You're not just waiting for one of your SIM rules to detect a suspicious pattern and raise an alarm, but you get a more dynamic view of the various risk scores. And at an early stage, you can see that some users' risk score has been increased because they may have triggered various anomalies. And as a result of that, you might be in a position to deem that this user needs to be investigated right away and detect an incident at an early stage, right? So that's what UEBA tries to do. And it forms that security baseline. It's analyzing what happens normally in your network on any typical day. It looks at how many logon events happen, how many file accesses happen, basically who does what, when, and where. It's the machine learning algorithms are going to train on the data collected by your SIM to profile all of these users and systems and understand what normally happens, right? The expected behaviors of all the users and entities in your network. And then subsequently, it can detect deviations from that expected behavior. It calls them anomalies. And based on these anomalies, it increases the risk score associated to that user or system. Let's look at how that would look like. Even before we look at that, let's look at a simple example, right? For those of you who are wondering why this is so important, consider this simple example where you have 3 different users in your network. Each user is from a different department. Each user works at different times, and each user works on different servers. Now, each of these users, you can see, are clearly different in terms of what they do, when do they work, and exactly what their work is, right? So John is working on specific servers ABC, and being in the sales team, maybe these servers deal with some customer CRM information or something like that. And James is from finance. James works on servers D, E, and F, and these servers may be storing some payroll information, invoices, and so on. And Jake is an IT administrator, so Jake obviously deals with different kinds of things. So now, what if John tries to connect to server D? Right? So John normally works on ABC. Why is he connecting to server D? It could be something legitimate. I'm not saying that it has to be an attack, but you can see that this is an anomaly, and that is what a UEBA can help you track, and it will raise the risk score of John. Now, what if James copies data from server A at 6 a.m.? You can see that the severity of this anomaly is greater than what John did because James is copying data at 6 a.m., which is not the time James normally works. and James is copying data from a different server that they've never accessed before. Maybe it's the first time James is accessing server A. Now, what if Jake performs 10 times the number of changes he normally does, right? So Jake may be making changes in Active Directory and normally makes maybe 3 changes to the Active Directory objects every day, but suddenly makes 30 or 40 changes on a specific day. So you can see that there are 3 different kinds of anomalies that we are mainly focusing on. We are focusing on anomalies based on the time. We are focusing on anomalies based on the count, which is to say that more events happened than expected. And we are focusing on anomalies based on the pattern of events, right? So something like a host being accessed for the first time by a user could be a pattern-based deviation, because this user does not normally access the specific machine in concern. So let us look at how this would look like in an actual solution. I'm going to quickly go to the UEBA console. Log360 UEBA is available as an add-on. This works on the data collected by Event Log Analyzer and AD Audit Plus. It is going to apply machine learning and statistical analysis on that data to profile the behaviors of your users and systems in order to then give you anomaly-based detection and risk scores. Right, so the first thing that you will be able to see as soon as this loads is the dashboard, which gives an overview of the various anomalies that have been detected. Right, so just wait for a few seconds. That would be a lot of data to consume. And what I want to show you is, yes, the dashboard, but more importantly, all of the risk scores that have been assigned to the users and systems, and then be able to drill down from that risk score and see exactly what anomalies the user performed in order for the risk score to be increased. Right, let me just try to reload this. I don't know, maybe closing this application could speed up the process. Let me just close these extra tabs. Okay, so bear with me on that. The online demo is a little slow. We're obviously working on limited setup, given that I'm doing this from home. But I just wanted to anyway give you an overview of how these things look like, so that if you are trying this out in your organization, you will be able to, you will already know what to expect. Right, so this is the dashboard, and it gives you an overview of how many events have been collected, some of the trends and anomalies. Same concept of a traditional SIM solution, same concept to a traditional SIM solution, except that here we are purely focusing on anomalies. We're not focusing on every single event or alarm, but we're focusing on trends and anomalies. We're focusing on what kinds of anomalies are coming in, what are the categories of these anomalies. And now the real game changer is being able to go to a user's view where you get to see the anomalies triggered by your users, right? So we are focusing on anomalies on 3 main categories. These are insider threats, data exfiltration, and compromised accounts. These are the 3 main use cases that we are focusing on, and we get to see how many anomalies have been triggered that could indicate one of these 3 kinds of attacks, right? So if you're wondering, hey, why doesn't insider threats plus data exfiltration plus compromised accounts add up to overall anomalies? The reason is because certain anomalies might be contributing to more than one threat. So you might have an insider threat who is trying to steal data. So that will be counted in both of these things. Now on the left pane, you can see a list of all the different users and the risk scores associated to them. So what this tells me is that immediately I see that most of my users are okay. They are in the low risk score range, but I see a few users who have a high risk score. So this helps me identify a potential cause of concern at an early stage, and also prioritize exactly which users and systems I want to monitor and investigate. Right, so I'm able to create watch lists I can specifically monitor some of these users who I can see have a higher risk score. And I can make sure now I can click on a user and see what are the events that they trigger. Right? You can see, for example, here you have, of course, at a high level, what kinds of threats they are contributing to. They could be an account, mostly a compromised account or an insider threat, and you get to see what are the different events that they have triggered. Right? Things like, okay, the user multiple host shutdown, multiple services installed, multiple removable disk deletes. All of these things are happening, multiple files modified. So all of these different events put together are contributing to the risk score. So you can see that 102 such events have happened when the threshold was 14 in terms of normal expected behavior. So all of these events put together, using these machine learning algorithms, we are able to get the details of the anomalies that have been triggered that has caused this user's risk score to raise to a specific number, and you are able to drill down and investigate what exactly this user has been up to, right? Maybe they have done registry events, maybe they have done system file changes, so many different things, unusual logons. All of these have been associated to the user. They've been classified as anomalous events, and you get this one dynamic view of the threats in your network, and you are in a position to prioritize your investigations and identify a security threat before it's too late. Right? So all this information is there at your fingertips, not just for your users, but also for entities. Because sometimes a user might not be, malicious, but maybe their system has been compromised by a malicious actor, could be from the inside or outside. So you can look at anomalies from the point of view of a server or from an entity. It could be a workstation, it could be a device, it could be an application, and you can click on the machine and see what are the anomalies that have been triggered, and you can also see the trend for that specific machine. So you can see that on a specific day, the risk score has increased very high, all the way up to 86. So you can click on this and see what were the events that happened on this machine that were deemed anomalies, and you can track all of this in a neat integrated way, and you can see exactly what's going on, right? So it's a dynamic thing. Again, you're able to quickly see, oh, I have most of my machines are okay, they have a risk score of 0, but I have certain machines which have a high risk score. So immediately these are the machines that you want to monitor, so you can make sure you can identify, put them on watch list, and specifically continue investigating these events. You're able to click on it, go to the details, check a specific event. You might be concerned about this anomaly at 6:30, click on details, and you're able to drill down and see what has happened, right? That's how powerful a UEBA can be. Even before you have to watch out for specific kinds of rules, you're tracking anomalies. Anomalies are things that are usually not supposed to happen. And if you remember the concept that I spoke about yesterday with alerting, I said that we are essentially looking to maximize the chance of detecting an attack, for which we need to look out for things that normally don't happen and be able to identify when things that are normally not supposed to happen. And this means that anomalies are an important point of concern, and you are in a position to look at your users, see which users have triggered anomalies, see which are the users with the highest risk score, click on a specific user and drill down and see what events they have triggered, what are the anomalies that they've triggered, and get the details of individual anomalies and investigate and mitigate the security incident at an early stage. Okay, so now this is UEBA, and we have come to almost the end of the workshop series. So I want to give you in a minute, tell you how you go about evaluating and deploying Log360 or any SIM solution. The first thing you need to do is download the product. It's available. All our products are available on the website with a free trial for 30 days. You just download it and it takes just a few minutes to install. Launch the product and explore the different tabs to see exactly what is that. Then you need to configure an audit policy and add sources for monitoring. Then you go to the reporting section and view the reports and charts that are being generated to visualize your audit information. And you schedule certain reports that are emailed to you on a daily basis so that you can keep reviewing important events of interest. Then you go set up alerts for individual events that are of concern. We looked at things like GPO changes or firewall rule modifications or SQL injection attacks or file encryptions. So set up alerts for a range of indicators of compromise. Then look at correlation rules. Use the pre-built correlation rules as well as the custom correlation rules to start tracking more complex patterns of events and reduce the alerting noise. Then look at threat intelligence, leverage the built-in threat intelligence platform that we have, and then look at adding some of your custom threat feeds like of the StickStaxi format, and then leverage advanced threat analytics to gain deeper insights into the threats. And finally, look at UEBA and how that can augment your traditional SIM solutions capabilities. Right? I recommend doing it in these stages because sometimes if you try to do everything in one go, you might not really see results. And most SIM deployments, don't really get kick-started because that starting bits are usually not done properly. So try to follow a staged approach in your deployment. With our solution, you can start seeing basic results from day one. You can start collecting data, generating reports and triggering alerts and correlations from day one. But it's advisable to still start with limited data sources and build on from that to get some of these more advanced capabilities that we have. Now, before I start taking the remaining questions, I want to give you this free add-on that we are currently giving. So we discussed advanced threat analytics and UEBA, and we're giving this as a free add-on for you all until the 1st of July 2020, right? So this is the page that you can access. Let me just type it out on the chat. So you can obtain the free license for the add-ons here. Just typing this out. So you should have received a chat. Simply go give in your name and email ID, and we will send you the license in just within a day. I think we should be able to send this to you. And you can, while you are deploying the solution, you can make use of the UEBA and Threat Analytics add-on, which is available for 90 days. And you can make sure that you are exploring these advanced features as well. Because in terms of configuration, there isn't much to configure for advanced threat analytics and UEBA. And really what you're looking at is, how much advanced analytics can you bring in? And the best part about that is you just have to apply this license and enable it, and you can immediately start seeing more benefit from your SIM deployment. So I hope that is useful for you. I hope you found this workshop series useful and you got some information that you were looking for. I hope you all learned at least a few new things from these 3 days of Log360 work online training. Do let me know. So you can drop an email to let me know your feedback, or if you have any specific concerns that you want to address. Do take a moment at the end of this workshop to give us your feedback. That will automatically pop up. And also send in your specific questions to my email ID if you wish, or any issues that you're facing with the solution. And I can make sure that these are attended to with the highest priority. Right? Thank you so much for joining us for the workshop. I will take a few questions now. I'll try to answer them on the live chat. So just stay tuned for a few minutes if your questions haven't yet been answered. But other than that, thank you so much for joining us for all 3 days. And do reach out if you need anything more. I hope to see you in the coming weeks. We have more workshops, webinars. We have some podcasts that are coming in. So I hope you will tune in and engage with us through those forms of delivering content as well. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day.